Hello, my name is Verena Ramirez Campos. I am the head of U.S. Medical Affairs at Teva. We were able to present 3 posters actually on Austedo. One of them was related to our long-term data. The second one was related to our real-world evidence study called IMPACT-TD and some results of the Part B of that study. And third, we presented a poster on the impact of patients' education on TD and how that can drive action, consultation, and positive outcomes for the patients. So those were the topics that we covered during this Congress. So I think there are key elements from each of these. So referring to RING-TD, which is our long-term study, 3-year study, I think it's very important to take the message that if you treat the patients longer, you can see a result. And even for those patients that may not respond early in the treatment, you still have late responders. So actually, the study showed that at almost 15 months of treatment for the patients that we had in RING-TD, there was more than 70% of the patients that were reaching a 30% reductions on the M score. So that's huge because really they were having really meaningful reductions in their movements by 15 months, so in the long term. And it was a high proportion of patients achieving this. So I think that's a very important message to take from RING-TD, that patients may respond later in their cycle of treatment. So to treat them for a long period of time and at the appropriate dose, it's important. In terms of the IMPACT-TD, I think the key element, that's a real world study. It was 8 patients that we had because of the cut of the data. So it's just a peek into what IMPACT-TD is going to show us. But I think the important takeaway is that 100% of those patients that were included in this analysis that we did, in this ad hoc analysis, had improvement in quality of life, had improvements in both PGIC, CGIC from the perspective of the HCP, from the perspective of the caregiver. And the vast majority of them had at 3 months already more than a 30% reduction on their AIM score and in their movements. So again, I think the takeaway from this poster is that in the real world, we are seeing the reduction of movement, but also the improvement of the quality of life in patients that are treated with Austedo. And third, the other important topic is related to education. In that poster, we really showed how Teva partnered with 3 key mental health advocacy groups. And we developed with them an educational resource that then was delivered to more than 1,000 patients. It was 1,100 patients and caregivers all together. And then we measured what was the impact of educating them before and after they received that education. And we saw impactful outcomes in terms of having more than 53% of those that were interviewed after getting that education, reaching out to an HCP, going and consulting about their movements, and almost 40% of them, 35 to 30% of them got really a diagnosis. So I think the key takeaway of that one, it's how good education in a language that patients can understand can really drive action for patients and caregivers and empower them. So I think what we wanted at this stage was to really see what was the trend and how were patients in the real world doing with Austedo. And that's why we decided to do this cutoff and see the patients that already had results. Of course, this study is ongoing still, and we are actually running and still enrolling for Part B. So we are hoping we're going to have much more data, but in reality, a good opportunity to understand what was the trend and where was the real world really leading towards. And it was, I think, insightful, interesting, but also something we were really hoping to see, that it's the response that patients do have on Austedo, because here with Part B, this is what we are looking at. Part A of that study, it's actually a registry that tries to understand the impact of the disease in patients, which is great. But this Part B is specifically to Austedo. So what we wanted to understand was the effect of Austedo, and it was great to see this high proportion of patients, really high, having improvements in quality of life and improvement in their movements.